So that's my background. And then when I was coming into Epicodus, and some things I really got out of it in a very general sense is that I really like test-driven development. I found something to be really, really comforting about it. And this talk has kind of helped me pin down why that is. And going into Epicodus too, I was really drawn to the fact that it was a pair programming environment. I really like working with people, and I like learning in social situations. And these are just kind of interesting things that I've been thinking about as I've been developing this talk too. So the name of my talk is Anna Kournikova was a great tennis player. And you say that around tennis players, and sometimes they're like, what are you talking about? Like that's like not really true. So I would like you to leave here today knowing this, that yes, she was a great player. But it'll take me a little moment to kind of make these arguments. So first off, when you're thinking of tennis and programming, my goodness, what on earth do they have in common? Why sports to begin with? For me, growing up playing a lot of sports and having learned sports as an adult too, I think that learning a sport is a lot like learning a language. It's a lot like learning any discipline. You just have to learn the fundamentals, get used to it, practice it, put yourselves in different environments where you are learning and doing things. I think playing sports is a lot like learning new languages too. If you know one, there's a lot of correlations that help you learn another one. For example, one of our classmates was a fencing instructor. So for me as a tennis coach, we're like, hey, let's trade lessons. And it turned out that he had some natural built-in skills as a fencer that helped him learn how to play tennis. And I had some skills vice versa. It worked out the same way. So it's kind of interesting that like your body can be a tool just like your mind is when you're learning to program. I think additionally, and this is my bias as a tennis player, that tennis has an additional connection, and it's really on a mental level. You may recognize this from a meme. But tennis, and the way it's always been explained to me, like when I was little, when I was first starting to play matches, is that it's really, really mental. Like you're relying so much on just your ability to focus and stay present. And people from other sports kind of look to tennis players, and they really try and figure out like what makes them unique and what makes them special. And something that I learned from a very young age too is that as a tennis player, like when you go out, for me, watching tennis growing up, you would see these people go out and they were absurdly young, 18, 19 years old, playing tennis in front of crowds of like thousands of people. And you really start to notice that in those situations, like in these big professional situations, those players are really alone and exposed. So think of Anna Kournikova. She was like 17 when she started playing major tournaments. She's a teenager, like out there on the court, like everyone's looking at you. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. There's so many stories of like really, really high profile catastrophes in tennis. Andre Agassi once was winning a match, and then Bill Clinton walked into the stadium and he lost. He just lost the match after that. It's like, well, how does that happen? And if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a piece on a woman, Yana Novotná, who was points away from winning Wimbledon and self-destructed, and he had to like ruminate on whether or not that was a choke or whether it was a choke or not. But there's just these really, really interesting cases where it's, oh my goodness, like catastrophe on the court. Like, how do you come back from that? How do you deal with that situation? So for me, in my humble amateur status, even in those situations, I deal with that. Like, how do I compete alone with no one else with me? You're not allowed to have a coach with you on the court. You can't talk to anybody during the match. You can't get any feedback on how you're doing. You have to really rely on yourself completely. So how do you prepare for that situation? How do you make sure that things actually go well and go the way that you want them to? And so much of it comes down to just preparation. Practice. If you're having difficulties with a certain skill, then go out and hit 100 forehands and see if it gets better. Set strategies for dealing with tricky situations. Try and maintain your focus. One of the hardest things to do in tennis, because like points can go by so quickly, is to like not get distracted by something going on next to you, or like not be thinking too far ahead of yourself. There's also like a reset strategy that you do. So for example, if you are finding yourself getting distracted, you say, oh wait, hold on, let me center again, and like I'll do something where I look at the strings on my racket and see, okay, are they straight? And I touch them all, and like, yeah, they're straight, they're always straight, but I still touch my strings to just kind of reset and be like, I'm here in this moment playing tennis. And if you can do all those things and you can get and execute, then you're able to win matches. But saying all these things, again, it should sound a bit like programming, like especially for students at Epicodus. Like we were practicing our coding skills every day. Like just write CRUD functions all day long, and then you're really, really going to know those well. And refactor, and you're really going to get better at writing dry code. There's all sorts of options there. And then if you're talking about focus, one thing we did at Epicodus was we had standing desks. Stand up and move around so you can kind of maintain a focus on what you're doing. Hit reset. So if things are really going tough, like our reset button was, hey, like ask a question, and ask a question that maybe you could Google and try and get yourself unstuck from a problem. So again, correlations there and like how you practice and how you prepare. But I have to kind of go back to like coaching and what I would say to myself if I'm really trying to win a match. Like, how do I coach myself? Or when I was working with young children, how do I coach a child to help them be successful in this environment where it's so easy to lose focus, to get out of touch with what's happening right in front of you? And this is a picture of Anna Kournikova when she was a very young girl, and this is her very famous coach, Nick Bollettieri. And I see this picture and I just think of, oh my God, like what is he asking her to do? Like Nick Bollettieri is kind of a large figure in tennis. He was training young kids to be #1 in the world. He wanted them to be the best they could be. And in my mindset, I would never train a child and say, you're going to be #1 in the world, because realistically, they're going to be lucky if they play in college. Like learning how to play a sport and actually succeeding in a sport, there's a really big disconnect. It's not that many people who are going to succeed, who are going to be #1, who are going to win major tournaments in the world. So there's a certain amount of managing expectations that coaches have to do. And there's a certain amount of like setting a realistic goal for a child or an amateur player when they go out to play. It's simple enough to do, and for me, the best advice I ever got was to just really focus on a single point at a time. Never look too far ahead. Never think, oh, if I just win this next point and then I win the next one too, I'll be fine. Anytime I did that to myself, I like collapsed. I couldn't think, I couldn't focus, I got distracted. Same thing goes like when you're actually in a point. It's really easy to like, get ahead of yourself. You're running out wide for a forehand, and then you think, I'm going to have to run back that way, and you pull back too quickly. It's like, no, you got to focus and stay right there. And I have this picture of Andy Murray. He's doing a post-match interview at Wimbledon, and when I think of athletes and mental strategies and how they really keep mental focus, I also think of two of their interviews after matches, and people say, so how'd that match go? What were you thinking about? And they're like, oh, it's just about playing one point at a time. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Try and get better every day. And as I was working on this talk, it was really funny because a friend of mine who's a Ruby developer he wrote to me and said, I think being successful is about discipline, and it's about the desire to improve. And I thought to myself, mind blown, like, wait a minute, that's strategy in sports. Like, you don't get too far ahead of yourself. You just focus on the problem at hand. And he was talking about test-driven development. Limit yourself. Like, really keep your problems small and contained so that you focus on the here and now and don't get too distracted. And as a beginner, being already 3 months into Epicodus, I was like, I understood test-driven development, I thought, but now I realized, no, I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting the fact that it was a winning strategy, that it was mentally going to help me focus and prepare for what I was trying to do. And so it really gave me this really calm sense. Everything felt really clear and wonderful when I realized that. Okay, back to Anna. So I really like talking about Anna Kournikova because she's a person who's kind of gotten a bit of a bad rap. Sometimes people are only remembered for the things that they're not able to do. So in Anna's case, I bet you could maybe guess how many singles tournaments she won. Any guesses?
0.
Yes, she didn't win any. Oh, whoops, that's this slide. So she never won any tournaments, any singles tournaments. She ended up having quite a reputation, so much so that in the World Series of Poker, they named a hand after her. So that an offsuit ace and king has a reputation also of never winning. So they said, oh, that's an AK. And so it's lovingly now referred to as an AK in some circles. But if you played poker, if you played cards, you know that you can win with ace, king, of, even if they are offsuit. It's a really powerful hand, but people kind of have selective memories. They only remember the bad things. And I bring this up in a discussion on programming too, because there's a lot of really high-profile programming projects that don't go very well. Cover Oregon being one, the affordable healthcare. You know, there's this rap out there that, oh, you know, if you try and start a web development project, it's not going to go well. And, you know, maybe test-driven development is one thing that can kind of keep us on track, focusing on one thing at a time. And I think, like, this is something that I would say to a client, too, like, hey, programmers, in a way, kind of work like athletes. They need to deal with one problem at a time. So it's a little bit harder to look at big ambitions like becoming #1 or building the best site ever for my particular idea. It's really this step-by-step process where you want to keep really focused on what you need in the moment. So yeah, she didn't win any singles tournaments. But just to kind of show that Anna Kournikova was an accomplished person and did have skill, she got up to #8 in the world in singles. Not too bad. Definitely indicative of the fact that she had mental capabilities of being a star tennis player. She just never quite got over that final hump of you have tons of pressure, you have tons of people looking at you, and you're not winning tournaments? Like, how terrible. So that's the TDD side of this discussion. So I'm about to talk about pair programming, and I think you can maybe predict what information I'm going to give you now. And this is again to kind of build up Anna Kournikova's reputation. She was a really great doubles player. She was a successful doubles player. She got ranked #1. She won 16 tournaments. And that's just a reminder that, you know, we can't only remember the things that people don't succeed at. We got to remember the things that they do succeed at. And for me, being someone who likes tennis and also kind of coincidentally loved pair programming, it's kind of been fun for me to compare playing doubles to pairing and what kind of successes those things can bring. And when you think about it, they're super similar. And with the doubles partners that I've had, when I was applying to Epicodus, I actually thought of how pairing must be a lot like playing doubles. Really takes good communication. You need to be able to talk with someone and work through problems together. It really helps if you know what your pair is strong in and what their weaknesses are. You can kind of protect them from their weaknesses and allow them to shine in their strengths. Really important in tennis to give positive feedback to your pair, and that comes in the form of a lot of high fives and good jobs and yeah, way to go, like we got this, like a lot of coaching kind of happens there. Same thing in pairing, like you kind of have to give positive feedback when you're working with a person. It certainly helps if you share a goal, and I've been hearing more and more stories about how focusing and pairing really go well together. With our experience at Epicodus, you know, we left everything away from us. You know, turn your cell phones off, can't be checking Facebook because you're sharing a computer with somebody. So it really helped kind of just focus on the problem at hand. And I've been hearing from more senior developers that they really find pairing to be helpful when they're really trying to get something done because that keeps you on task and keeps